Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask-strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 692 for April 26th, 2018. This time around, I'm in Dublin, Ireland, sitting at the bar in 9 Below on St. Stephen's Green. Coming up in just a few minutes.
It's distilled spirit, or whiskey now, that was laid down in 1998. That's when we started producing. That's when I came to the distillery, a young man back in 1998. I was a distiller at that time. Benromach has aged very well, Mark, over the years, and I've watched that aging process myself, being here for the whole 20 years.
Scotland's Benromach Distillery in Speyside is celebrating 2 anniversaries this year. The distillery's 120th anniversary and 20 years since it reopened following a 5-year-long restoration project by Gordon and MacPhail. Keith Cruickshank has been there for the entire 20 years and is now the distillery manager at Benromach. He'll join us later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. I'll also have the calendar of events, your voice, the What I'm Tasting This Week department, and once again we'll go behind the label, all on this special episode of WhiskyCast from Dublin.
This is whiskey, Johnnie Walker's Scotch whiskey, from this place and these people, Scotch makers, creating the bold and complex flavour of Johnnie Walker Black Label. Step right up.
WhiskyCast, brought to you by Redbreast, the definitive single pot still Irish whiskey. Those in the know Redbreast.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by Highland Park. Right now, let's break into your regularly scheduled WhiskyCast news update with some breaking news. This episode was recorded on Wednesday evening in Dublin. Thursday morning, during production, we got word that Elixir Distillers, which is run by Sukhinder and Raj Singh, who also own the Whiskey Exchange in London, have finally announced plans for that long-rumored distillery they've been talking about building on Islay. They announced last night on the island that they plan to build a distillery near Port Ellen, assuming they can get planning permission from the Argyll and Bute Council. The construction could begin as early as next year. Distilling could begin in 2020. We'll have more details on this on the weekend episode of WhiskyCast. But for now, let's return you to your regularly scheduled episode. And once again, I'm in Dublin this week for the debut of Jameson's new Bow Street 18-year-old edition. It's the first time Jameson has ever released a cask-strength edition outside of the distillery. And it builds on last year's reworking of the old Jameson Distillery visitor experience in Dublin into the new Jameson Distillery Bow Street, complete with a small maturation warehouse inside the visitor center. As Master Blender Billy Layton explained, that's the key to the new whiskey.
It's a reaction to consumer demand that we found with people that enjoy the regular Jameson 18. The feedback would be, and we take notice of it, that wouldn't it be lovely to have a cask-strength Jameson? And we would tend to be led by consumer demand, and so circumstances came together that gave us the opportunity to produce the cask-strength Jameson, the Jameson Bow Street 18, and have the facility at the old original premises of the John Jameson's distillery. So it kind of completed the loop for me, it brought the story of Jameson back to its roots.
We have mentioned this before when the Jameson Distillery Bow Street, formerly the old Jameson Distillery experience, opened a little over a year ago, but there's actually a small maturation warehouse inside the visitors center that you're using the barrels from for this expression, right?
That's right. Whenever the refurbishment of the Heritage Centre was being thought about and designed, we did put in it's a small maturation room The idea behind it, initially was that it would give the visitors a little bit more of an experience, like a hands-on experience, to see where whiskey has actually been maturing in live casks in the maturation house, and from that, then the idea came about then that wouldn't it be good then to do a new Jameson expression right back in the home of John Jameson.
Jameson 18 Bow Street will be released once a year, and because there are only 84 casks to work with at a time, it'll naturally be a limited edition. The price in Ireland will be around €240. That's around $293 a bottle. The U.S. price has not been announced. And by the way, I mentioned that this is the first cask-strength Jameson release outside of the distillery. If you visit the Jameson Distillery Bow Street in Dublin, there's a Jameson Black Bottle Fill Your Own Bottle special that's bottled at 60% ABV. However, you can't get it anyplace other than the distillery. And one other note, last year we reported on the launch of the Method and Madness range from Irish distillers, which highlights the Middleton Masters of Whiskey and their apprentices. Karen Cotter was Master Distiller Brian Nation's apprentice and had been running the small micro distillery inside one of the old Middleton warehouses. She has now been promoted to a production role inside the big distillery, and Henry Donnelly has taken over in the micro distillery. He joined the Jameson Graduate Distiller Program 2 years ago after graduating from University College Cork with a degree in process and chemical engineering. And full disclosure, I am in Dublin this week as the guest of Irish distillers for the Jameson Bow Street 18 launch. But as always, full editorial control over the content of this episode remains with WhiskyCast. Now, back in January of 2016, we met Niche Drinks founder Kieran Mulgrew as he was launching his Quiet Man range of Irish whiskies. Niche Drinks also makes the St. Brendan's Irish Cream Liqueur for Luxco, and now the St. Louis-based company has acquired a majority interest in Niche Drinks. Mulgrew has been trying for a couple of years now to build a distillery in the old Derry Naval Yard. Luxco plans to move those plans forward. It'll be the second distillery for the family-owned company. Earlier this month, Luxco held a grand opening for Lux Row Distillers in Bardstown, Kentucky. No purchase price for Niche Drinks was disclosed. Brown-Forman has announced the opening date for its new Old Forester micro distillery and brand home on Main Street's Whiskey Row in downtown Louisville, Kentucky. After a number of delays, largely because of a major fire next door in 2015 that forced engineering reviews of the historic structure that will become the new home of Old Forester, the $45 million project will open to the public June 14th. Online bookings for tours opened up Tuesday at the distillery's website. It's the latest distillery project along Whiskey Row near the downtown riverfront. At the East End, Angel's Envy opened to tourists last year near Louisville Slugger Field, while the West End has, among other things, the Evan Williams Bourbon Experience, the Michter's micro-distillery project that is still under construction, and the new Rabbit Hole Distillery that is expected to open for tours at some point next month. No official date has been set yet, but Rabbit Hole is hosting a dedication party at the distillery on May 4th, the eve of the Kentucky Derby. Back in February, we broke the story of Metallica's plans to get into the whiskey business and their partnership with veteran distiller and consultant Dave Pickerel. I caught up with Dave the other night to get a status report.
I am crashing 90 miles an hour. Now, I'm not allowed to say an awful lot about it yet, but I get to meet with all the folks. You know, I'm actually going to fly to Stockholm on the week of May 6th to go hang with the band and go to a concert over in Europe. You know, if you look at me, there's sunshine coming out of my ears because I'm just having a heck of a lot of fun. I spent all morning, I think I spent like 5 or 6 hours doing the math, trying to decide exactly what my first batches are going to look like. But it's not official that we're doing anything yet.
I know because the band has not responded to my emails to their website going, what's going on here, guys?
That's kind of by agreement, is that I'm allowed to say a little bit, and they're going to no comment their way through it. So I can't really say an awful lot, but I'm having a lot of fun. We can leave it at that and watch this space. Something's going to happen within a few months.
That's not the only thing keeping Dave Pickerel busy these days. He works with a bunch of distilleries as a consultant and told me that at last count, 10 of his clients are in the middle of expansion projects right now. We'll have more details on the Metallica project as they become available. A few weeks ago, we mentioned the debate in Tennessee over whether barrels full of maturing whiskey should be subject to state property taxes. The barrels themselves, that is. The auditor in Moore County, Tennessee, decided recently that the barrels at Jack Daniel's did not qualify to be exempt from property taxes, and the state's attorney general agreed with that decision. That could have made Jack Daniel's and the state's other distillers liable for millions of dollars in property taxes. The bill for Jack Daniel's alone was estimated by state officials at $2.8 million. Now, Tennessee lawmakers have passed legislation to make the barrel exemption clear in state law. The bill is on its way to Governor Bill Haslam for his signature. We've mentioned Sagamore Spirit in Baltimore a lot recently as it celebrates its first anniversary, but it is not the only distillery in Baltimore. The Baltimore Whiskey Company has been distilling its own rye whiskey for a while now, and the second batch of its Epoch Rye will go on sale at the distillery in the next few days. Keep in mind that while Sagamore Spirit is distilling and laying down stocks for the future, all of its current spirit comes from MGP. And according to Baltimore Whiskey Company co-founder Ian Newton, Epoch Rye is the first rye whiskey actually distilled in Baltimore for more than 50 years. Back in the day, Maryland was a major area for rye whiskey distilling. Let's turn to Scotland now, where Eden Mill Distillery in St. Andrews has released its first single malt whiskies. The Hip Flask series is made up of 7 different bottlings from different casks and mash bills. Founder Paul Miller has been experimenting with chocolate malt and crystal malt, in addition to the standard pale malt. The Hip Flask series name comes from the 20 cl bottle size that each of the whiskeys is bottled in. The first 70 cl Eden Mill full-size bottling is expected later this summer. We'll have more on this story on an upcoming episode of WhiskyCast. Douglas Lang & Company has released a new cask-strength edition of the Epicurean blended malt. The Glasgow edition is a limited edition release that was the result of a blending session Fred Lang had with some local bartenders back in January. He picked his favorite recipe from the bunch to be produced as the Glasgow edition. It'll be available at whiskey shops globally for a recommended retail price of around £46. That's about $64 a bottle at current exchange rates. Last time around, we had a preview of the Spirit of Speyside Festival, and I mentioned that it's fairly rare for the distilleries in Speyside to produce a special festival bottling. Of course, as soon as that episode went out, we heard from the folks at Glenfarclas. They'll be releasing a festival exclusive from a 2004 second fill sherry butt. The cask was selected by distillery manager Callum Fraser, and here's the thing. It's apparently the first time in more than 150 years that the Grant family has let a distillery manager pick a single cask to be bottled. It'll be available at the distillery starting on May 3rd, with only 80 bottles available each day on a first-come, first-served basis until they're gone. The price is £120. That's around $168 a bottle. And looking ahead a month from now to Fay Gilles, the Islay Festival of Malt and Music. If you're planning to make the pilgrimage to the island by ferry, it might be a tougher ticket than usual. That's because one of the CalMac ferries that serves the Hebrides is out of commission right now, and CalMac has been juggling schedules to keep service going. But the Islay blog reports a lot of ferry sailings to Islay have been canceled between now and May 23rd. The festival begins on May 25th. We are trying to get a CalMac spokesperson to update the situation for us, and we'll keep you posted. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com. The news is brought to you by Highland Park, the Orkney single malt with Viking soul. The days are getting longer on Orkney now, and that means it's time for The Light, Highland Park's newest single malt. You can get all of the details at highlandparkwhiskey.com. Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events. Kings County Distillery in Brooklyn, New York has a Brooklyn Distilled Walking Tour coming up this Sunday, April 29th. Here in Dublin, Teeling Whiskey Company will have an after-hours tour and masterclass on May 2nd. The Whiskey Extravaganza is coming up May 3rd in Houston, Texas. And the Water of Life charity tasting is that same night in New York City. The Spirit of Toronto Festival is May 5th in Toronto. The London Whiskey Weekender is May 11th through the 13th. Whiskey Live Pretoria is May 17th through the 19th in South Africa. And the Whiskey Show Sydney is coming up May 18th and 19th in Australia. Right now we have 275 different events on our searchable calendar at WhiskyCast.com. If you have a festival or a tasting coming up, just use the contact form on our website and let us know all about it.
Redbreast fans have always cherished our whiskey's sherry notes, so we set out to embellish that character. Introducing the Redbreast Listowel edition, a quintessential single pot still Irish whiskey finished in first fill Oloroso sherry casks from Spain's prestigious Bodegas Listowel. Carrying Redbreast's trademark pot still spices and dark dried fruit notes, the Listowel edition is graced with an enduring sherry finish that would be better described as a final act. Discover the newest branch on the Redbreast family tree.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Lagavulin. Benromach Distillery in the town of Forres is one of Speyside's smallest distilleries and could easily have faded away when it was closed 35 years ago, back in 1983, when there were too many Scotch whiskey distilleries at the time, and that's when many of Scotland's iconic distilleries were closed. Benromach opened 120 years ago this year, back in 1898, and this is a milestone year in a couple of other ways. 10 years after it closed, Gordon and MacPhail in nearby Elgin acquired the old distillery and then spent the next 5 years bringing it back to life. The stills ran once again at Benromach 20 years ago this year. Keith Cruickshank was one of the 3 employees at Benromach back then. A few years later, he was promoted to distillery manager. And this is a big year for Keith and his much larger team.
We've got a few things lined up. We've got some trade things going on for some of the trade customers, special things. Some of our own staff, we're doing some events for them. Just a celebration, really, some dinners and some special whiskey tastings and such like. We're also hosting the opening gala dinner for the Spirit of Speyside Whiskey Festival. The last time we did it was in 2010. So that kind of kicks off the celebrations for this year, but we've got quite a few things lined up. The Whiskey Festival, we've got special tours and tastings, anniversary tastings and such like. So, and we also have this special 20th anniversary bottling, which is very exciting for us.
And tell me about that one, because this is a one-time only that you guys have really put some effort into, right?
Yeah, well, this is a one-off bottling that we have. It's distilled spirit or whiskey now that was laid down in 1998. That's when we started producing. That's when I came to the distillery, a young man back in 1998. I was a distiller at that time. So, and we started producing about August 1998, had the official reopening in October. So we only laid down about 240 casks, something like that. So it's very rare, the whiskey we've got in 1998. This particular bottling is it's a mixture, it's a marriage of sherry and bourbon casks, fast-fill casks, obviously, because we have a fast-fill policy here at Benromach. So it's a marriage of vintage 1998 sherry and bourbon. It's limited edition, 3,000 bottles, I believe. We have natural cask strength, unchill filtered, obviously, and it's 56.2%. It is an excellent dram. Benromach has aged very well, Mark, over the years, and I've watched that aging process myself, being here for the whole 20 years. So this specific bottling has that typical citrus, spicy notes. You seem to get that with a lot. It seems to be a thread that runs through quite a lot of the Benromach. And you get that, the rich fruitiness, that's coming from the aged sherry cask. And believe it or not, that hint of smoke, that classic Benromach style, the classic style, that hint of smoke coming through as well. So, yeah, it's a lovely, lovely dram.
As you mentioned, you started at the distillery when it reopened in 1998. Tell me how things have changed over the last 20 years.
Wow, that is a question mark. Quite a lot. It's quite strange. I look back now to the early days and I see what we've done. Way back in 1998, there was myself, the young man, the distiller, and I had my manager at the time, Bob Murray at the time. So we had the distillery and we had one warehouse, and we started producing the spirit. Got the character that we wanted, that old, rich, Speyside style with the delicate smoke, and it's quite a medium body as well. Over the years, we have, especially the last 5 years, to be quite honest with you, there's been a rapid expansion and investment at the distillery. So since 1998, we have invested in the infrastructure and warehousing especially. So we started off with one old dunnage warehouse, which held about 1,300 casks. We quickly had to build another one in succession, so 2001, 2007, and then we built another two, 2014, and then in 2015 had quite a major expansion at the distillery. Built another one, which unfortunately replaced the old warehouse 2, which was in pretty poor condition. So now we have 5 dunnage warehouses. They're not old dunnage warehouses, but they're made with modern materials. So we're kind of just trying to replicate that, that old, cool, moist environment that you'll get from an old dunnage warehouse using modern materials like earth and floor and ventilation and insulation all year round. So we've got the 5 warehouses. We've increased from 1,300 casks, and at the moment we have 13,000 casks. And we are now looking at building some more warehouses next year with probably enough space to build another 14 warehouses if we choose. So quite a lot of investment in there, because Benromach is a single malt, and most of the Benromach will be bottled between 10 and 20 years. To be honest, we need a lot of warehousing capacity. We've also changed the visitor centre. We've invested heavily in tasting rooms and such like for the discerning customer who seems to be wanting this more enhanced tours. The thirst for the knowledge and just the passion for the product. They want to know so much about the history and the distillery and the character and the people that's there as well. So we've invested quite a bit in new tastings at the distillery, bought the old distillery manager's house a few years back and invested that as a tasting room, and we can take clients and customers, and the offices there and canteens and staff, etc. So we've invested quite heavily, and also last year we invested in a new tun room, so we can increase our production up to the maximum. Now, we're not there yet, Mark. We started at 135,000 litres of alcohol, which was about 850 casks per annum. Now we are up to just under 400,000 litres of alcohol and filling 2,500 casks. So you'll see the investment that we've had over the years. It's been millions we've spent in investment. The Attic family spent in MacPhail, in Benromach, to future-proof us for the future, for increasing production and growth and such like. So to answer your question, I've seen there's been a lot of change here, probably in the last 5 years, Mark, to be quite honest with you. But it's all good investment back into the distillery for the future. And we employ more people here now. We have 3 distillers and an assistant manager, and we have visitor centre staff all year round as well. So, yeah, exciting times for Benromach, for investment and how the site has changed.
And I would imagine that 20 years ago, you didn't have a whole lot of people coming by to visit the place, did you?
No. 20 years ago, we didn't have a visitor centre. Visitor centre was opened in 1999, year after we opened it for production at the distillery. And yeah, the visitor numbers were quite modest back then. We were probably 3,000-4,000. Now, last year we took in 13,500. So you'll see how the growth of the production and the brand, everything sort of grows together. So, and now the visitor centre is very, very busy. So we didn't see much people back then, really, as in visitors, and we just produced, me and the manager just produced the spirit. But yeah, it's a different distillery now, but it still holds the same values as we had many, many years ago of the classic old Speyside style, and it is manually made here. It's just the way we do it. It's the way we've always done it. It's a modest, small distillery. It was back then we were classed as one of the smallest. Well, was the smallest in Speyside, but now there's so many craft. We call them craft distilleries, Mark, but you know what I mean. Distilleries of similar size to Benromach that are owned independently and are producing some lovely, unique spirits. So yeah, the visitor side has really increased over the past few years.
So what are you going to do for the 25th anniversary 5 years from now?
Well, that's a really, really good question. I mean, this year's been great. We had a fantastic start to the year. One of our products, the Benromach 15-year-old, got a fantastic award at the World Whisky Awards. It won the best category for Speyside, the Speyside single malt. So it was absolutely fantastic. So that was a real great start to the year. For the 25th mark, I don't know. So I think if we just get past this year first, and then we can see what happens for 25 years. I think for me personally, obviously, it's quite a personal journey for me, and having the products grow up. The way I always describe it is it's like a family. Now, when I came here, I was a younger man, obviously. My wife was pregnant with my first son. He's now 20 years old. He's taller than me. He's now at university, So, and all the products of Benromach as they've came out, it's almost felt like family members. They're all just different. They've got different personalities, different ages, So, but they all come from the same family. They've got the same DNA, and that's how I look at the 10, the 15, the 10, fantastic whiskey. The 15 is really, really something special. But it's just different. The 15's got a different attitude, different way, personality than the 10. But we're still connected to the same DNA. Now, what's going to be exciting for me is the journey further. People say, what's next for them? What's coming out next? What's new? That's always what we're after, isn't it? What's new? What's different? For me, it's seeing how that family grows up. From the 10 to the 15, you can see the difference, the maturity, the mellowness coming through from the fruity sherry notes, but still that classic Speyside with the delicate smokiness and that lovely malting tones. It'll be great to see the next one, which will be the 15-year-old's, as I call it, its older brother or older sister, depends on its personality. So it's really exciting to see the next age statements coming out, and the other whiskies that we have in between. It's not just about the classic style. We have contrast whiskies and our heritage style from bygone years as well. So, yeah, if we get past this 20th year, we can then look forward to the 25th mark and just see where it brings us. But certainly the first 20 years for Benromach has kind of been a success story, to be honest with you.
So what is your son studying in university, and is he going to follow you into the business?
I don't know. My son is studying sports science at University of Highlands and Islands. So I don't think he's going to come into the whiskey industry, but I don't know. He might take a different turn. He might take a different direction. I don't know. So at the moment, he's very, very keen on his sports degree, and we support him every step of the way with that. So, good luck to him.
Thanks to Benromach's Keith Cruickshank for spending some time with us this week. And that's WhiskyCast In-Depth, brought to you by Lagavulin, Islay's legendary single malt. The 2018 batch of cask-strength Lagavulin 12-year-old will be out later this year as part of Diageo's special releases. But until then, you can find the classic Lagavulin 16-year-old, the Distiller's Edition, and the 8-year-old Lagavulin at a whiskey shop near you. Find out more at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. I was one of the first, and perhaps the first outsider, to taste the new Jameson Bow Street 18-year-old Wednesday. The first release is bottled at 55.8% ABV, and the nose is aromatic and intense. Think of it as Jameson on steroids, if you will. There are notes of ginger, honey, vanilla, white pepper, and mild spices. The taste starts off with butterscotch and honey sweetness, followed almost immediately by intense spicy notes of clove, white pepper, allspice, and ginger, along with dark fruits, charred oak, and subtle vanilla notes in the background. The finish is long and dry with lingering spices, and this whiskey will redefine the way you normally think of Jameson. I'm scoring the Jameson Bow Street 18-year-old a 94. Now here at 9 Under, I had the chance to taste one of Middleton's single pot still whiskeys, a Powers 16-year-old single cask bottling for Dublin's Celtic Whiskey Shop, located just around the corner. It's a first fill ex-bourbon cask filled in 2000 and bottled at 46% ABV. The nose is very complex with good spices, balanced by honey, vanilla, caramel candy, chocolate fudge, and marzipan notes. The taste, well, it's thick and spicy with cloves, cinnamon, and white pepper, complemented nicely by honey sweetness, touches of nougat and marzipan, and just a bit of chocolate fudge. The finish is long, very long, with spices that last and last, along with a subtle sweetness underneath. Powers is one of those underrated whiskeys that deserves a lot more credit than it gets, and I'm scoring this 16-year-old single cask Powers bottling for the Celtic Whiskey Shop a 94. This week's tasting notes are brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery, makers of Bernheim Wheat Whiskey, the first new style of American whiskey to be introduced since Prohibition. It's aged for 7 years in traditional open rickhouses, and Bernheim's mellow taste is refreshingly smooth. Learn more at heavenhilldistillery.com. Think wisely, drink wisely. Now, as long as I'm in Ireland, let's look at a couple of other Irish whiskies that the Whiskey Fairy's cousin, the Whiskey Leprechaun, delivered samples of recently. The Sexton is a new Irish single malt from Proximo Spirits and is the U.S. arm of Beckley, the Beckman-owned family business behind Bushmills and Jose Cuervo. And with that corporate synergy, it's not hard to guess where the whiskey for the Sexton came from, though I have no idea why they wouldn't just brand it as Bushmills. It is bottled at 40% ABV with no age statement. The nose has good notes of malt and caramel candy, along with honey, butterscotch, and dried flowers. The taste starts off light and floral, followed by good spicy notes that develop slowly and are balanced out nicely by hints of honey and caramel candy in the background. The finish is long with lingering spices and a nice balance, and I'm scoring the Sexton Irish Single Malt an 89. Next up, let's look at the Kilbeggan Single Grain from Beam Suntory. This one is bottled at 43% ABV, and the nose is buttery and floral with a hint of lemongrass, coconut, and muted spices. The taste is floral and buttery smooth, followed by nice spices and hints of citrus and honey in the background. The finish is long and tart with subtle spices, and I'm scoring the Kilbeggan Single Grain an 89. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. You can find my tasting notes for more than 2,100 different whiskeys at WhiskyCast.com.
This is whiskey. Johnny Walker's Scotch whiskey. From this place, and these places in that place. These are the people that make it. This is what they sound like.
Because you're a cheeky wee blighter.
Dance like. Aye, like that. This is what they do all day. Building the great character of Johnny Walker Black Label. Aging Hickey and Oak for 12 long years.
Thanks. Oh, it's gorgeous there.
What is character? It's giving a damn.
You're all right, lassie.
Which looks like this, as much as this. See, the land that shapes these people and the people that shape this whiskey all shape how bloody good it tastes.
Put the bloody game on the telly, Alan.
A whiskey as bold as it is complex. For every step you take, this is Johnny Walker Black Label, friends. Step right up.
Cut.
Can I drink this now?
Johnny Walker Black Label Blended Scotch Whiskey. 40% alcohol by volume. Imported by Diageo North America, Norwalk, Connecticut. Please drink responsibly.
Once again, I'm sitting at the bar, a very noisy bar at 9 Under on St. Stephen's Green in Dublin, Ireland tonight. And let's open up the inbox now for this week's Your Voice, brought to you by Lot 40. I got an email the other day from Mark Williams that helps clarify our tasting notes a few weeks ago and our reporting on Ardbegg's new Grooves limited edition single malt. At the time, we cited Bill Lumsden's comments in a recent interview about the grooves in those casks that were created by heavily charring them. But I didn't mention that those casks were former wine casks. Most people think of charring in connection with ex-bourbon casks, but Mark saw the details on the hang tag that came with his bottle. Thank you for that extra information, Mark. The other day, Adam Bradshaw at Drunken Meeples on Twitter sent out this comment after we announced the decision to start producing 2 episodes of WhiskyCast each week. How on earth do you find the time, Mark? Research, correspondence, writing, recording, editing. Most would need a whole team. If you ever decide you need a whiskey squad, let me know where to apply. Adam, I appreciate the effort, but we already have a whiskey squad. While you hear my voice on each episode of WhiskyCast, our entire family works together to make each episode possible. There's no single way that I could do it all by myself, and I owe it all to them. And on that note, after our first midweek episode last Thursday, Bazi Karatsu tweeted this note: "You messed with my biological clock, Mark. I'm living the whole day like it is Monday." Sorry about that, Bazi. If you're a regular listener to WhiskyCast, you know that one of my other passions is motorsports, especially IndyCar racing. The Verizon IndyCar Series was in Birmingham, Alabama this weekend to race at Barber Motorsports Park. Ryan Burnett at Travel Crazy on Twitter is a longtime NASCAR fan, but tweeted this note out over the weekend. WhiskyCast, I gave your precious IndyCar a try on Friday for practice and garage pass. I was impressed. I am now a fan. Ryan, I'm glad you had fun, and thanks for giving IndyCar a look. And finally, I was at one of Dave Broom's book tour stops for the Way of Whiskey last week in Philadelphia. Dave and I did a Periscope video online, and I promised in that video that we'd give a signed copy of Dave's book to one person selected at random who both liked and retweeted the video on Twitter. Congratulations to Omar Fitzell of Cork, Ireland, at That's Dram Good on Twitter. He's our winner, and the book is on the way. If there's anything you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, you can always post it on the Your Voice page at whiskycast.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr at WhiskyCast. And if you're not on social media, you can always email us. The address is comments@whiskycast.com. Your Voice is presented by Lot 40, Canada's award-winning 100% pot still rye whiskey. Lot 40, unapologetically Canadian. Please drink responsibly. Let's go behind the label now. Our newest segment looks at the backstories of whiskey with a special eye to the science as well as the history of whiskey so that you can learn more about the water of life. Since we talked about Benromach's anniversary earlier, it's worth noting that over the next several years, we're going to see a lot of distilleries in Scotland celebrating milestone anniversaries. That's because the 200th anniversary of the Excise Act is coming up 5 years from now in 2023. The Excise Act is what made it reasonably feasible for farmers to get licenses for their stills and go legal, with George Smith of the Glenlivet being the most widely known for coming out of the shadows in 1823 and getting the first license issued under the Act. What about all of those distilleries that now track their origins back to before 1823? Well, there were various excise tax schemes in place from as far back as 1660 until the Excise Act was passed in 1823. But as you can guess, the distillers of those days weren't exactly running down to the tax collector to pay up. We know that, for instance, Glenturret Distillery dates its official history back to 1775, but can trace its illicit history all the way back to 1717. It's one of a handful of distilleries that has claimed to being the oldest in Scotland, along with Bowmore, Glengarry, and Little Mill. Until someone perfects time travel, though, we're never going to be quite sure which distillery is actually the oldest in Scotland. If you have a topic you'd like us to address on Behind the Label, just email us. The address is comments@whiskycast.com. Of course, we can trace the history of WhiskyCast all the way back to November of 2005. And we have all of the episodes to prove it in our archives at whiskycast.com, along with links for our WhiskyCast HD episodes and the WhiskyCast Tasting Panel podcasts, the latest whiskey news, events, cocktail recipes, photos, and a whole lot more. Once again, we'd really like to know what you think of this new format for WhiskyCast. You can let us know online at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Tumblr, or just email us. That address again is comments@whiskycast.com.
WhiskyCast, brought to you by Redbreast, the definitive single pot still Irish whiskey. Those in the know Redbreast.
This is whiskey, Johnny Walker's Scotch whiskey, from this place and these people, aye, Scotch makers, creating the bold and complex flavour of Johnny Walker Black Label. Step right up.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask-Strength Media, copyright 2018, and usually comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. But this time around, I'm on the road and at the bar in Dublin, Ireland. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.